This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila and Vietnam. Hello, Charlene.
Hello, I'm Charlene Navaja from your EBC Vietnam Bureau, bringing you the latest news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines.
Kung ayaw mo magpabakuna,
President Duterte threatened to jail people who refuse to be vaccinated against COVID-19 following reports of low turnout at various vaccination sites.
4 protesters and at least 2 officers were killed as Myanmar soldiers battled an anti-junta civilian militia with small arms and grenades in the country's second city Tuesday, authorities and military sources said.
Thai authorities green-lighted a pilot model for quarantine-free travel to ultra-popular beach destination Phuket, a first step towards the tourist-hungry kingdom's goal of resuscitating the pandemic-battered economy.
And the United States government was pleased that President Rodrigo Duterte decided to postpone the termination of the visiting forces agreement, raising hopes that the agreement will continue.
President Duterte threatened to jail people who refuse to be vaccinated against COVID-19 following reports of low turnout in various vaccination sites in the country. Let's listen in.
kung ayaw mo magpabakuna, ipa-aresto kita. I have to sequester you in jail. Mamili kayo. Magpabakuna kayo o ipakulong ko kayo sa selda. Filipinos not heeding the government. Total tayo dito, wala naman tayong hangarin kundi kabutihan ng ating bayan.
Kasama po yan sa tinatawag na police power of the state at alam naman natin na meron ng mga desisyon na kinilala talaga na pagdating po sa isang emergency dahil po sa isang pandemic, talaga namang kikilalanin ng hukuman yung primacy po.
Ilagay natin sa konteksto. Ang ating bakuna ay free and prior informed consent, kaya kailangan magpirma sila ng consent para magbakuna. I think it is born out of the passion and the need of the President to emphasize the point na kailangan magpabakuna.
It's more of a fatherly statement to convince all of us to have an injection. Para na rin itong word of endearment do sa mga pasaway.
Melalas Moras for the Nation.
Justice Secretary Bernardo Guevara said Mr. Duterte merely used strong words to drive home the need for us to get vaccinated and reach herd immunity as soon as possible. The Department of Health said the president's words were just born out of passion as it reiterated that free, prior, and informed consent is a requirement for vaccination.
Vaccination and jab logistics management are among the topics that will be tackled by the National Task Force, or NTF, against COVID-19 with 3 Israeli health experts. The Israeli delegation, composed of Avi Ben-Zaken, Deputy Director General of the Ichalov Medical Center, Daphna Segol, Consultant of Healthcare Policy and Innovation, and Adam Siegel, Logistics and Operations Manager of Solomon Levitt Elstein Ltd, arrived in the Philippines on Sunday afternoon and will stay until Friday. They initially met at Camp Aguinaldo, Quezon City on Monday. Let's take a look.
At maganda po yung mga experiences natin, mga protocols, and also kung paano nila pinapangalagaan ang kanilang mga vaccine. Tomorrow, magkakaroon po kami ng extensive discussion on logistics management, on how we will preserve our vaccine so that we will not have wastage, and how we can distribute it the soonest possible time as you directed to us, that it will be delivered on time to the provinces. Kasi po talaga yung ibang mga vaccine natin, nahihirapan po tayong i-dispose doon po sa rural areas dahil kasi po very sensitive. And with their experience on handling cold storage, yung isa pong specialist po doon, siya po yung parang kasama po sa mga cold storage facility na binigyan po ng authority ng Israel.
According to a Channel News Asia report, Israel expanded vaccine eligibility to include adolescents in May and urged more 12 to 15-year-olds to get inoculated. Since then, infections have fallen off sharply in recent weeks.
In a press briefing, Philippine Ambassador to the U.S., Jose Manuel Babe Romualdez, said that the country is set to get some 800,000 to 1 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines to be donated by the U.S. And this will be in July. Manila is among the countries included among those that will receive a portion of the 500 million vaccine doses Washington will procure for donations. Take a look.
Yan yung ating in-negotiate noon pa. At yung first batch, pag dadating sa atin mga June 27, yung first batch yan, no? Medyo maliit yun, pero next month, July, that will probably be close to 1 million. Tapos succeedingly, down the road, up to around November, we will be getting the entire 20 million from Moderna. Ngayon, yung donation galing sa Amerika, naalala natin yung announcement ni President Biden, meron silang 80 million na sort of like excess. Doon sa 80 million na yun, we're going to get something like close to 800 to 1 million doses, either Moderna or AstraZeneca from their stockpile, which is expected to be given to us by next month. Pagkatapos, meron silang yung 500 million na donation nila to the world. Kasama rin tayo doon sa donation na yun. So we're getting quite a substantial amount of doses or vaccines coming from the United States, aside from what we've already negotiated. Ngayon yung in-announce ni Secretary Galvez, yung 40 million, yan part of the COVAX facility, which is also a donation coming from the United States. We were able to get that, of course, at a very, I would say, very low price, precisely because it is to help countries like the Philippines.
All COVID-19 vaccines available in the country are effective and can provide protection against all coronavirus variants, including the highly contagious Delta. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, Director General Eric Domingo said Monday as he urged the public to get their jabs. In a briefing with President Rodrigo Duterte, Domingo said, while there is a decreasing efficacy of vaccines as the virus mutates, vaccines still remain useful in protecting the population. In the Philippines, there are 17 cases detected with the Delta variant as of June 21.
The data for Pfizer shows that for the UK variant, yung Pfizer vaccine po, mataas pa rin, nare-retain niya yung mataas na efficacy rate niya of 93%. Pagdating po doon sa Delta variant, although bumababa po ng konti, meron pa rin naman pong 88% no, na efficacy against the Delta variant. So there's a decreasing efficacy as we get more mutations, but hindi naman po completely nawawala ang bisa ng bakuna. It's still a useful vaccine. Yun naman pong AstraZeneca vaccine, ang nakita po nila na overall efficacy niya for the UK variant is about 66%, at nung tiningnan po for the Delta variant, it's about 60%. So nagagamit pa rin naman po talaga, may protection pa rin na ibibigay.
So, itong AstraZeneca pati yung yung isa, they are...
Yun pong Pfizer.
Pfizer, effective, at least it gives you an ample protection against...
Well, sir, ngayon, sir, actually po ongoing din naman ang study ng mga itong bakuna like Janssen, Moderna, Sinovac, Sinopharm, and Sputnik on the efficacy nila against the Delta variant. Kaya lang wala pa po talagang nasusulat na report. No? But initial reports indicate that they are also useful. But of course, we expect that it will be a little lower than the original efficacy dun po sa original na variant po ng ating bakuna.
Yung Delta po, as I have mentioned, is 60% increased transmission over Alpha or yung UK variant, which was already 60% increased transmission over the original virus from Wuhan. So mabagsik po talaga to. If we thought Alpha was mabagsik, yung UK variant, mas mabagsik po itong Indian variant, yung Delta. And of course, there's also the finding that yung mga partially vaccinated, yung one dose pa lang, nahahawa pa rin po sila. Kasi mukhang itong Delta really needs 2 doses para maprotektahan po ng maayos. Yung 1 dose po is not very good at protecting against Delta. Sabihin ko rin po kasi yung napag-usapan yung face shields, the Delta variant is also 40% more infectious outdoors, 60% more infectious indoors. So it would be nice po to have an extra layer of security na even if hindi naman required, the PAG will still recommend to continue to use face shields even outdoors, especially with the threat of the Delta variant.
Meanwhile, in Thailand, authorities green-lighted a pilot model for quarantine-free travel to ultra-popular beach destination Phuket, a first step towards the tourist-hungry kingdom's goal of resuscitating its pandemic-battered economy. Thailand has imposed strict restrictions on visitor arrivals in order to stem the coronavirus, but discouraging visitors has led to its economy recording the worst performance since the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Take a look.
Whether there would be any criteria for the cancellation of Phuket Sandbox if anything adverse happens. Now, if you recall, I had mentioned earlier that a contingency plan is in place for Phuket, and the authorities will be very in much strict enforcement of the various measures in Phuket. Now, there are some criteria set for Phuket in case of any contingency or emergency. For example, if there are 90 persons infected per week in Phuket, that would be a criteria for reconsideration of the scheme once it has started or for any adjustments. Also, if all 3 districts in Phuket are affected and in that more than 6 villages are affected, that would be another criteria. If there are COVID cases and no linkage, no contact tracing is found, no contact tracing is possible, that'll be another criteria. And if the hospital beds in the province, the hospital bed capacity exceeds 80%, that would be another criteria. Some of the reconsideration of the Phuket Sandbox scheme would be possibly to decrease the level of activity, business activities, or to conduct sealed route travel, and also to have more hotel quarantine. And ultimately, if worst case scenario, then they would have to halt the scheme in Phuket. But of course, this is in preparation of a worst case scenario.
The hugely important tourism industry has been on tenterhooks since March, when the government floated the so-called Phuket Sandbox scheme, which would have allowed vaccinated tourists to enter the country without undergoing the usual 2 weeks quarantine. But after a third wave of COVID infections engulfed the country in April, the scheme appeared to be on the back burner thanks to muddy messaging from authorities. Tourism officials and members of Thailand's COVID task force announced that on Friday the Sandbox scheme was set to begin on July 1. Besides Phuket, the other destinations include Koh Samui, Koh Phangan, and Koh Tao, all sun-soaked islands, renowned for clear waters and sandy beaches. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha announced last week that he plans for Thailand to fully reopen to foreign visitors by October, a vow that would require his administration to hit the target of inoculating 50 million Thais in 4 months. And we'll be back right after this break.
Ang trabaho naman talaga ng maritime group ng PNP is to enforce the maritime laws.
Tayo lang yung stricto, pero in other parts of the country, pwede na naman ang tourism.
Definitely, we are ready to respond to a possible spike.
Sapagkat ang aming intensyon ay makatulong lang sa mga tao na wala talagang magamit na gamot.
92 voted for this resolution, which will make it stronger, calling on the Justice Department to come up with more stringent ways to be able to avert these hate crimes against Asian Americans.
Mas marami po tayong magagamit ngayon na mga tools or mga equipment.
Maraming salamat, Weng, at sa buong puwersa ng Balitalakayan sa pagkakataong ito.
Tatalakayin ang mga pangunahing balita live sa teleradyo ng Net25 at Radyo Aguila DCEC 1062. Kasama si Weng de la Fuente sa Balitalakayan.
We live in interesting times.
Welcome back. 4 protesters and at least 2 officers were killed as Myanmar soldiers battled an anti-junta civilian militia with small arms and grenades in the country's second city on Tuesday, according to authorities and military sources. Fighting has flared across Myanmar since the February 1 coup as people from defense forces to battle a brutal military crackdown on dissent, but clashes have largely been restricted to rural areas. Acting on a tip-off, security forces raided a house in Mandalay's Chanmia Tarsi Township on Tuesday morning. The junta's information team said in a statement and were met with small arms fire and grenades. 2 officers were killed during the raid, according to military sources, and at least 10 were wounded. 4 terrorists were killed and 8 arrested in possession of homemade mines, hand grenades, and small arms, according to a junta spokesman in a statement. Another 4 members of the self-defense group were killed when the car they were attempting to flee in crashed, according to the spokesman, without providing any other details. The U.S. Embassy in Yangon said on Twitter it was tracking reports of ongoing fighting in Mandalay. It said, "We are disturbed by the military escalation and urgently call for a cessation of violence." The mass uprising against the military putsch that toppled the government of Aung San Suu Kyi has been met with a brutal crackdown that has killed more than 870 civilians, according to a local monitoring group. As well as the rise of local self-defense forces, analysts believe hundreds of anti-coup protesters from Myanmar's towns and cities have trekked into insurgent-held areas to receive military training.
The UN country team today again called for the immediate release of thousands of women, children, and men currently in detention in Myanmar, almost 5 months after the military seized control of the government on February 1st, the UN spokesperson said on Monday. According to the UN Human Rights Office, the number of people arbitrarily arrested and now in detention has topped 5,000. Let's take a look.
And a quick update from Myanmar, where the country team again called for the immediate release of thousands of women and children and men currently in detention almost 5 months after the military seized control of the government on February 1st. As of today, the number of people arbitrarily arrested now in detention has topped 5,000, and that's according to the UN Human Rights Office. In addition, nearly 2,000 people, including politicians, authors, human rights defenders, teachers, journalists, healthcare workers, monks, and ordinary citizens remain in hiding due to outstanding warrants for their arrests. In a statement over the weekend to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict, the UN Population Fund in Myanmar said that survivors of sexual violence and their families carry the trauma of these heinous crimes. In Myanmar, survivors, including those born of rape, live in shame, stigma, and limited health and social support, and few options to seek legal redress. UNFPA stresses that perpetrators of sexual violence must be held to account and that survivors must be provided with prompt, non-discriminatory health care, legal protection, and social protection.
Myanmar's junta chief thanked Russia, a major weapons supplier to the troubled Southeast Asian country, for strengthening the army, which seized power in a coup earlier this year. Myanmar has been in turmoil since the military overthrew civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi and her National League Democracy government in February. Russia has backed its ally and warned the West against sanctioning the junta. Thanks to Russia, our army has become one of the strongest in the region. Russian news agency TASS cited Min Aung Hlaing as telling Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu during a meeting in Moscow. The friendship between Russia and Myanmar is becoming stronger and stronger, according to the junta leader, according to his comments translated into Russian. Min Aung Hlaing is in Moscow for a 3-day international security conference, which kicked off on Tuesday and brings together defense officials from across the globe. It is the junta chief's second known trip abroad since he seized power. On Monday, he met with Russian Security Council Chief Nikolai Patrushev, with the two agreeing to improve ties between their two countries. A junta spokesperson said Min Aung Hlaing then met the head of state, arms exporter, Rosoboronexport, Alexander Mikheyev, to discuss potential military technical cooperation. Although the Kremlin has said it was concerned by the civilian casualties, Moscow has sought to develop ties with the junta. In March, a Russian deputy defense minister joined an annual parade showcasing Myanmar's military prowess, including Russian-made jets, tanks, and helicopters.
The United States government was pleased that President Rodrigo Duterte decided to postpone the termination of the visiting forces agreement, raising hopes that the agreement will continue. Here's Philippine Ambassador to U.S. Jose Manuel Romualdez.
We're hoping that this... Well, of course, we were very happy about that. As you know, both countries have sat down to different panels, and we've had... I wouldn't really call it negotiations, but clarifications on the terms of agreement, which was completed. Sabi ni Presidente, gusto niyang pag-aralan yon. Aside from the fact that, of course, our relationship with the United States is a very important one. So itong VFA is one of the many aspects of our relationship outside of the economic, and of course the special relationship in terms of how many years that we've had. This year, we're celebrating 75 years of our diplomatic relations. No? So, yung balita na merong mga backdoor negotiation, hindi totoo yan dahil very open naman tayo sa BFA. And of course, I'm one of those that believes that it's really important for us because it's mutually beneficial anyway. Aside from the fact that, to be honest about it, the VFA, I think, has benefited our military, of which Secretary Lorenzana has confirmed this on several occasions. So we're hoping that this will continue, and of course the U.S. government, is, especially the U.S. military establishment, is very pleased with this development that the President has extended it for another 6 months.
Duterte relayed his decision to suspend the termination last June 14 while he studied, and both sides addressed his concerns about some aspects of the security pact. Hoping for its continuation, Romualdez underscored that the VFA had been one of the many aspects of the very important Philippine-U.S. bilateral relations.
A Singaporean woman who starved, assaulted, and ultimately killed her domestic worker was sentenced to 30 years in prison, with a judge describing the case as among the worst types of culpable homicide. The domestic worker died in July 2016 after her employer, Gayatri Muragayan, repeatedly assaulted her over several hours. Gayatri, 41, pleaded guilty in February to 28 charges, including culpable homicide. Another 87 charges were taken into account in sentencing. After hearing an additional plea of mitigation submitted by Gayatri in a bid to avoid the life sentence sought by the prosecution, Justice Siki Gon sentenced her to 30 years in prison starting from the date of her arrest in 2016. The maid was employed by Gayatri and her husband, a police officer, in 2016 or 2015 to help take care of their 4-year-old daughter and 1-year-old son. But Gayatri physically assaulted the victim almost daily, often several times a day, with her 61-year-old mother sometimes joining in, according to court documents.
A Cambodian court has charged 4 environmental activists with insulting the king and plotting against the government, an official said Monday, after 3 of them were arrested for documenting waste runoff into a river. Use of royal definition laws in Cambodia is a relatively new phenomenon, with the legislation only enacted in 2018. The 3 activists, Sonarata, Lee Chandaravut, and Yim Linghe of advocacy group Mother Nature were arrested Wednesday for documenting the draining of waste into Phnom Penh's Tonle Sap River. Over the weekend, they were charged with conspiracy to plot and for insulting the king. Klang Sopal, a spokesman for Phnom Penh Municipal Court, told AFP in a text message Monday. Also charged was Mother Nature's co-founder Alejandro Gonzalez Davidson, a Spanish environmentalist who has deported from Cambodia in 2015 after he criticized the government's plans for a controversial dam. Sopal did not elaborate on why the activists were hit with those particular charges. While Cambodia has a constitutional monarch, King Norodom Sihamoni, it has long been ruled by its strongman Premier Hun Sen, Asia's longest-serving leader. When the Lee's Majest laws were enacted in 2018, they were triggered alarm from rights groups who warned they could be wielded to target dissent. If sentenced, the Mother Nature activists face a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison for insulting the king, as well as 10 years behind bars for the conspiracy charge. The tussle over Cambodia's environment and resources has long been a contentious issue in the kingdom, with environmentalists threatened, arrested, and even killed in the past decade.
In celebration of World Environment Month this June, the Philippine Department of Tourism reiterates the need for tourists to educate themselves on sustainable interaction with marine wildlife. Observing marine wildlife in its natural habitat is incredibly fulfilling and quite an experience you cannot forget, according to Tourism Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat in a statement on Tuesday. She stressed, however, that while this is an extraordinary experience, irresponsible interaction with marine wildlife can cause severe long-term damage to them and their environment. Respecting the ocean and its inhabitants must be the top priority of every tourist who wants to connect with marine wildlife. Learning how to properly engage with these species is a small but crucial step in protecting and sustaining our marine biodiversity, according to Puyat. She also said the DOT will conduct awareness seminars to educate tourism stakeholders on sustainable and responsible marine tourism guidelines come second half of the year, especially now that local tourism continuously picks up on coastal destinations. Now, these guidelines are part of the Joint Memorandum Circular Number 2020-01 on Rules and Regulations governing the conduct of marine wildlife tourism interaction in the country, issued last year. Future plans in the memorandum also include identifying, accrediting, and recognizing marine wildlife tourism sites in the country that are dedicated and compliant with the regulations. Now, these highlight how collaboration between public and private institutions is beneficial for preserving the country's natural resources.
ASEAN in Focus, we'll be right back.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights, sharpen your instincts for smart decision making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus. The British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, along with South Korean, Singaporean, and Vietnamese counterparts, attend ASEAN-Europe meeting, high policy dialogue in Hanoi to discuss various issues, including trade, the fight against COVID-19, and climate change. UK Foreign Minister Raab said the UK have just started talks to join CPTPP trade treaty. Let's take a look.
We warmly welcome the signal from ASEAN leaders that they will accept the UK's application to become a dialogue partner. We're starting negotiations to join CPTPP, and we've put a major focus on the Indo-Pacific in the context of the G7 presidency that we host this year. And I think joining the CPTPP will provide a boost economically for all sides. It's a high-quality, win-win multilateral trade deal. But it's also a boost to the principle of free trade as we work with others to try and help shape and reinforce future trading rules. I think it's also an important signal that CPTPP and the region can send to other countries.
ASEAN partners have continued to do our best to keep our economies open and to integrate our economies and to continue to stand for the cause of free trade, despite the political opposition accentuated by the fears brought on by COVID-19.
The start of talks to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, made up of 11 countries with combined 500 million people, came as Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab met with his counterpart and other Vietnamese officials during his 5th visit to Southeast Asia. The UK also looks to promote closer ties and trade relations with the region following Brexit. The UK is also looking to attain dialogue partnership status with the 10-country Association of Southeast Asian Nations as it pursues a tilt toward the region in response to China's growing influence on the world stage that was recommended by a recent UK government review of defense and foreign policy. According to South China Morning Post, following Vietnam, Raab was to visit Cambodia and then end his trip to the South to the region of Singapore.
In other news, Asian markets rose today to extend a global rally as fresh pledges on monetary policy by the Federal Reserve reassured investors who had been rattled last week by the bank's forecasts of an earlier than flagged hike in interest rates. Wall Street tanked Friday and Asia followed suit Monday as traders contemplated a rate liftoff possibly next year as officials try to prevent overheating and soaring inflation caused by the world's top economy thundering out of the collapse of 2020. Fears about the end of ultra-loose policies put in place at the height of the pandemic have haunted trading floors for months, knocking a more than year-long equity rally off stride. All three main indexes on Wall Street ended with healthy gains for a second straight day, with the Nasdaq at a record and Asia took up the baton. Tokyo, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Singapore, Seoul, Wellington, Taipei, and Manila all rose through, though Sydney and Jakarta edged slightly lower.
And back to the Philippines, Department of Trade and Industry Secretary Ramon Lopez said the country's free trade agreements have opened more opportunities overseas for Philippine construction industry.
Hong Kong is in the global market. In this regard, the Philippines' participation in the FTA or free trade agreements is providing an avenue to allow greater economic activity and job generation, especially with the construction industry. FTAs offer a more stable, predictable, and fair environment for Filipino businesses and investments, including those in the construction and related engineering sector. For local construction services, the Philippines was able to secure liberal arrangements in foreign markets, including 100% foreign equity participation in activities like general construction work for buildings and civil engineering, among others. Philippine-based businesses are guaranteed this arrangement through its existing FTAs with ASEAN, Australia, China, the European Free Trade Associations or EFTA, Hong Kong, India, Japan, Korea, and New Zealand. These presently provide Philippine construction-related companies the opportunity to do business in these markets and provide their services to these countries on a non-discriminatory basis.
During the virtual conference of the Philippine Overseas Construction Board on Monday, Lopez said through the FTAs, the government has secured liberal arrangements in foreign markets for local construction services. These liberal arrangements in the construction sector include 100% foreign equity participation in construction activities such as general construction work for buildings and civil engineering. The trade chief said exploring these opportunities overseas will also help construction-related enterprises to recover due to the impacts of the pandemic.
Now, the Philippine Southeast Asian Games team, Chef de Mission Mon Fernandez, bared today, or on Tuesday night rather, the SEA Games Federation is set to convene anew regarding the state of the 2021 SEA Games in Hanoi amid the pandemic. He said the SEAG Federation will be meeting on the 24th. Fernandez said during the Banana Cake podcast, the coronavirus pandemic or situation in Vietnam has put the holding of the SEA Games in jeopardy, with cases rising at a record pace, although not as dreaded as in some other countries. As of June 21st, Vietnam's 7-day average of new COVID cases was at 378 after the confirmation of 272 more infections. Now, one of the top models for handling the pandemic during its early days last year, Vietnam's recovery rate plummeted to 40.3%. mainly due to the ongoing spike and its interestingly slow vaccination drive. Now, Fernandez, currently a commissioner in the Philippine Sports Commission, said everything is bleak at the moment. And earlier this month, the Vietnam Olympic Committee proposed to the SEAG Federation the postponement of the SEA Games to July next year. However, 8 other national Olympic committees, including the Philippines, rejected this proposal, mainly due to the athletes' preparation.
Nonito Donaire and John Real Casimiro will clash in what could be the biggest all-Filipino world boxing title bout. Both Donaire and Casimiro have agreed to unify the World Boxing Council and World Boxing Organization bantamweight titles in their showdown scheduled for August 14. Donaire, the reigning WBC champ, first announced the news on Sunday. My team does magic. Thank you to Richard Schaefer, Rachel Donaire, PBC Premier Boxing Champions, TGB Promotions, and Showtime, Donaire said. Casimiro, the current WBO champ, confirmed the development by simply tweeting two Philippine flag emojis with the letter X in between, symbolizing Philippines versus Philippines. Donaire's wife, Rachel, then relayed in her Facebook post how both camps agreed on the all-Filipino battle. The 38-year-old Nonito Donaire took the WBC title from Nordin Ubali last month with a huge fourth-round knockout win and became the oldest bantamweight champion ever. On the other hand, Casimiro has been holding the WBO title for 2 years already.
In celebration of its 69th founding anniversary, the DOST PHIVOX launched a new mobile app called volcanoph.info or Volcano PH Info via an online press conference dubbed as Info Centros PHIVOX. With the Volcano PH Info, the public can access straight from their Android devices the latest volcano bulletins and advisories. The abridged and visually appealing information on the app will help the users understand the current volcano status and, more importantly, identify the necessary preparedness and response actions for their safety. Users can select from the list of volcanoes with alert levels on the homepage. After clicking on a particular volcano, they will be provided with a summary of the 24-hour observation period containing the alert level, monitoring parameters, and recommendations in Filipino language. They can view the volcanic earthquakes for the past 2 weeks and access volcano advisories and additional information such as alert level scheme, bulletin archive, volcano hazard maps, volcano preparedness guide, and glossary of terms. Future developments of the app include English language setting and iOS version. The violent Hibok-Hibok volcano eruption in 1951 led to the creation of the Commission on Volcanology, or COMVOL, through the enactment of Republic Act No. 766 on June 20, 1952. In 1982, COMVOL was restructured and renamed to Philippine Institute of Volcanology, or PHIVOX. 2 years later, the mandate of earthquake monitoring was transferred from the Philippine Atmospheric, Geophysical, and Astronomical Services, or PAGASA, to PHIVOX. The latter became PHIVOX to include seismology, or science of earthquakes.
Nearly half a century after he sowed fear along the 1970s hippie trail, French serial killer Charles Sobrage, the serpent of the hit TV drama serial, still haunts the lives of those who cross his path. Now 77 and jailed in solitary confinement in Nepal since 2003, Sobrage is suspected of involvement in at least a dozen murders around Asia in 1970s.
Terrifiant pour moi, c'est... Les amis sont toujours les bienvenus à la maison.
What's wrong with us?
I work for the Dutch embassy.
Their families haven't heard from them in over 2 months.
Yes. I look for the Google about everything about Charlie, and I want to know about the house, about what happened here, and I saw the internet in Sukhumvit 4, and I want to go there.
Le moment le plus terrifiant pour moi, ça a été quand je me suis retrouvée dans l'ascenseur avec eux, quand ils m'ont rappelé à la maison. On était tous les trois dans cette petite cabine et mon cœur battait la chamade. Je l'entendais moi-même, mon cœur. J'étais sûr qu'il l'entendait aussi. Et que si j'avais mon cœur qui battait comme ça, c'est que j'avais quelque chose sur la conscience. J'avais peur.
I was annoyed, but what can they do? Nobody can blame me. No, nobody. Nobody blame me because I did my best, and I saved the police department face because the crime suppression make a mess.
Nobody has ever caught me. I expected to feel great guilt. I did not. I felt free.
Thank you for keeping me company, Charlene, as always.
Thank you so much, Alma. And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. Thank you for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. This is Charlene Navaja from your Vietnam Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
And we'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.
Factual.
We have to defeat the virus everywhere.
Timely information. Balanced, not only in the country, but also abroad.